was able to provide personal information on his profile, StudentAid BC profile. Then he began his journey filling in information on the financial assistance application by providing his personal information. Then he continued that journey by providing education program and financial information. And at this point, it was all very UI focused, so very surface level. So in other words, there was nowhere for them to save or submit this information until we did some heavy duty back-end work. So just put that on your pinky finger for a second there. In order for Matt to complete his journey, he needed to dynamically access information on post-secondary institutions. So we had to bring in the post-secondary institution account into the fold. So we were able to get Zoe to come in. She's an admin assistant, and she was able to authenticate her business BCEID identity and create a post-secondary institution account with SABC. So that kind of brings you up to date. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Elise, who's going to just scrub. Oh, it's not locked. That stinker. It's not locked. I'll lock it down. What we did is Sprint 5, which was less development focus and more analysis. But I will let you explain that, Elise.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michelle. So 62 people. That's what Adrian tells me. So I think that's a metric that we probably need to keep. Just flagging. And let's see if we can hit 100 at the end of this.
Yeah.
So here's what we've been doing in Sprint 5. So we plan to continue to do some work, not a huge amount because we've got some heavy technical pieces, but we wanted to continue to set up the institution account profile. And so we're pleased to show you that today. The majority of Sprint 5 was what we called a hackathon, which is quite a technical piece. And Andrew's going to speak more to that because he speaks techie and I don't. But essentially that involved doing some analysis around a couple of different options that were presented, which would allow us to save information that is entered on the application. So obviously a really, really important piece of technology. And so some analysis was done. And so once this decision is made, we'll be able to move forward and keep moving forward. Build. Then we'll be able to keep moving forward on the application. So really critical. At the same time, this sprint, the UX UI folks, so the user experience, user interface folks, had a lot of work to do, particularly around the institution account, starting to think about what does the dashboard look like. We're starting to touch on program, which is a really big change the business wants to make. It's one of those strategic opportunities. And so the business is moving towards a place where they're making some decisions about that in the next couple of weeks. So we're starting to get ready to have those conversations with them. And also making sure that we understand how users are set up in the system and starting to give the user experience folks time to think about what's the best way to present that. So I'm just going to give you a couple of reminders around business context, pardon me. So this is where I want to kind of flag that there's quite a bit tech heavy, this particular session and this demo. So if you are like me and a business person kind of leaves going, I'm not quite sure all the technology, just know that there was a lot of really great technical work done, and that technical work is really critical for us to be able to move forward, and that the decision that has been made is absolutely evidence informed, which is one of our principles, and a lot of hard work and analysis went into making this really important decision. So as I mentioned, we've also just started moving into an area where we do plan on making significant changes as a business, which relates to program and program management. And so we expect to have some decisions in the next couple of weeks, which are going to make quite a big impact in the future as to how we manage programs. And a lot of the other mini projects, just to let you know, there's been incredible work done by the business area in making some really big decisions, and some decisions that we just haven't had to think about for such a long time. So just to give you an example of that, I was just saying at our branch meeting that I asked Blaine the other day, well, are we going to start calculating using cents? Right now, we don't do that. You know, on rounding, and when do we round, and are we going to give out money? Are we going to give out 47 cents? Are we things that we haven't been able to do? So we need to rethink and decide, are we going to keep doing it the same way, and what are the impacts? So those are some exciting decisions that we get to make. So we're going to do the demo this morning. And again, just want to remind folks, this is my standing reminder that it's not all pretty yet. We're not showing you a 100% done. We're showing you where we are so far, and there's a lot more work to make it pretty. You are probably going to see some typos and some things in the wrong places. So definitely keep that in mind. If it's killing you or you're really worried about it, please put us something in the chat or let us know. Oops. Does someone have something to add?
I'll just make sure everybody's muted.
Sure, thanks.
Except for you.
But yeah, so just let us know, but know that obviously we will go through and make sure that we catch some of those things. Because I don't know about you, but I type institution so often that I always miss that second T. And there's going to be lots of those things in here as well. So don't let that distract you.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna keep moving forward like we do, is kind of our new approach. We're gonna keep moving forward. We're gonna go all the way through, and then we'll have questions at the end. But please feel free to throw stuff in the chat, because we'll make sure to come through and go over everything with folks. Okay?
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
So, you know, while it might be a preference for the dev team to kind of take 2 weeks off just to kind of do some analysis and play in sandboxes and yeah, I actually wanted to make sure that they had something to show. And that's kind of a principle that we have as a team, that there will always be at least some product to show you, regardless of whether deep technical foundation decisions need to be made. We have to do something. So Schwenker has volunteered to show us what the dev team was able to work on. And this happens to be the institution has, they've gathered the information from Business BCID. That information has come in, and now it is read only. And now they continue fleshing out their profile by adding more information to their SABC account. So I'll let Andrew talk about that with you.
Sure. So just to go through that first one, provide institution account information. I will share my screen here.
There's that second T, Elise.
Perfect. Can everybody see my screen right now?
Yes.
Is it? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. So that screen is what you saw originally, just the login with BCEID. I'm going to use, I think it was this one. Oh, this is just the standard BCID login flow here, and then you come back to our profile or completing your account profile. So as you see, first name, last name, and legal operating name are pulled in from BCEID. Email is pulled in and editable because it can be removed from BCEID. And then you can continue your profile here. So institution operating name, primary, I'll just put in a whole bunch of things here. Institution operating name, primary phone number, email, website, regulating body. I'm just kind of zipping through these here because they're just data fields. Established date. So as we see, regulating body was a date picker, or sorry, a drop down. Established date is just the date picker. So picking a date cannot be in the past, today, or in the past. I'm not sure why that's saying that, but we'll have a look.
It need to be in the past, Andrew. It's like established date, the date it was created. So today
needs to be in the past.
Yeah. Yes.
Backwards. Primary contact information, first name, last name, email, phone number. legal authorized authority contact, going through here. As you see, this isn't necessarily everything, it's just saying test 2, but primary institution address, province, state, country, postcode, and then we have a next button here. And when we hit next, you will see created. Institution user has been successfully created, and this is the dashboard here. So we now have that institution account with all that provided info as a profile. As Elise mentioned, there's additional validations and tweaks and things to be made as we go. Do you want to take it back, Michelle, or just keep going with the rest? You're on mute.
Oh, I'm actually pretty good at, unmuting. That's very rare when I don't. I was just going to say that this is a little bit different in that a lot of the information that we're gathering as part of an application is now on their profile. So I just wanted to put that on your pinky finger as you're thinking through some of your good questions that you're going to have at the end of this. Yeah, Schwenker, continue on. We're just going to be moving up to section 2, and he's going to talk about the hackathon and some of the decisions that have been made in the last 2 weeks.
Sorry, before we move on, can I just make sure to, because I feel like for some folks, I don't know about you, but it feels like 2 weeks goes by really quickly. So I feel like perhaps I didn't do as good job with the business context as I should have there. So just a reminder that this is for new institutions. Because institutions that are already existing will already have accounts. So what Andrew just showed you is a new institution that has signed into our portal and that is providing us with information that historically would have been on the designation application, because that's the kind of information that we're collecting. And then, of course, they've now set up an account. And then we're going to have to move into, in a future sprint, setting up the users on that account, setting up the locations on that account. But this is just the basic information that we capture for new institutions when they come into our system. So
and that's after they've applied for, oh, am I allowed to ask questions right now?
Well, not really, but let me clarify that we're not, so what we're talking about here is that right now, institutions download a designation app, institutions go onto the website, fill out the application form, the designation application form, and press submit. And that ships over to us this attachment in an email. What we're saying is that this is a change to the process, and the institutions will log into the system using their business BCE ID, and we will be able to recognize whether or not they are a new user or not. And if they are new to our system, then we will begin to create an account with validations, making sure that if they decide that they want to start creating a duplicate account, we won't allow that to happen. But that they will start filling out this information directly into our system rather than completing an application form. So it's a different process. So maybe folks can think about that a little bit more, and then we can have some more questions when we get to the question period. And please write your questions in the chat, because I don't know about you, but I forget what I was going to ask.
Perfect. So just to recap our analogy here of our triplex, we have students, institutions, and ministries all with the same, all with different doors, but all working in the same house. Part of what our project or our outcome of our hackathon was is to, as Elise likes to put it, where do we put our plumbing? We need to put the things in the walls before we put all the fancy bells and whistles on the pieces here. So I'm just going to give some background context about the hackathon a little more. So during the sprint, we conducted an analysis of the 3 solutions, of 3 solutions, with the primary focus on handling the financial aid application and the changing form complications for yearly and ad hoc basis. As we all saw with COVID and all this different stuff, we need to be able to make changes, and so the investigation was intended to fulfill that requirement, but the outcome was definitely not limited to just that requirement, and I'll get into that a little more. Some more background context. We needed to reach this point in development before starting this investigation, so we had more of the picture done. As you see now, we have the 2 doors done for institutions and students. And I say done in air quotes, but we have that functionality in there now. So now that we have more of a picture, we're able to look into these options a little closer. So what we did is a SWOT analysis of each of the solutions. I know it is tiny. I will zoom in 1 second. So our first option we looked at was continuing with our current stack, which is just the custom view front end, which is what you saw, with the middle and back end. I won't speak too technically, and if questions come up, I can dive into that. But with that already, for those that don't know, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Oh, that's locked. So strengths for this stack here, developer knowledge is already very high, meaning it is a very simple structure. It is known to most developers. The stack choice is adaptable and highly customizable to nearly any requirement, and the solution maintains a very simple architecture. There's only really the 3 big blocks in the picture. It's quite simple. Some weaknesses with that, length of time to do first-time customized integrations could be timely. Complicated business requirement logic and validation can be hard to build and maintain with custom logic. I'm sure everybody can relate to that, but when you have like nested types of questions and things like this, and if we make this say no and this change yes, how do all these things keep working together? Last weakness we identified, all of our integrations, even our internal system integrations, need to be built from scratch. And what's meant by that is, this is also assuming that Commando is our rules engine. It is basically what's doing the hard work of the assessment, doing the calculations, doing all the math. For opportunities, the solution is incredibly customizable to any solution because it's so simple, because it's so well known, we can make it do basically anything. Threats here, so build time and maintainability could be lengthy and complicated based off changing business requirements and those other elements here. Option B here is a solution called FormsFlow AI. FormsFlow AI is a open source product. It is built by AOT, but it basically just links a whole bunch of open source applications together, being Commando already, which is our rules engine, Form.io, Redask, which is an analytics engine, Keycloak, which is our identity broker, and basically all these solutions, it basically just packages them up into a workable fashion and then has sort of bonus functionality on top of it. Sorry, this is very small. I will just read it out. Internal system integrations set up by default. What I mean by that is the form engine in the solution and the rules management system, Commando, is already set up. This application stacks can make adapting forms to changing business requirements significantly easier. I'll give a little quick demo of what that looks like. No additional licenses are required to be purchased. The application stack provides additional functionality that may fulfill future requirements. That's that sort of bonus requirements that are already in the package that we can decide on our team if we want or don't want. We can always chop things out of the solution. That's the beauty of everything being open source and adaptable. Some weaknesses to it. Moving to the solution will mean that there is a learning curve for the team. It's obviously a bit of a new platform. FormsFlow AI does bring a more complicated architecture. Opportunities, though, this solution could enable rapid development of complex forms and logic. And what I mean by that is we all know that we are not just a full-time student application. We are a lot more than that. We have a lot of other things to do. So being able to handle these different forms and stuff in a nicer fashion could be a lot easier for us. Long-term maintenance could be a lot easier due to the feasibility of changing forms and workflows. And you'll see that coming up here. Threats, the learning curves could be significant lengthy, and I'll talk more about these as well and as soon as I'm finished here. And longevity and sustainability could become an issue with a vendor application. There is a a note for this one afterwards too. The last solution we looked at was CHFS. That stands for Common Hosted Forms Service. In short, I'll just talk at a high level what this is. It is basically a form IO, which is basically a program that handles form rendering essentially. It is basically that open source application, which is free, that the lab community basically put a nice fancy bow on it and made it so you can plug and play with it. Basically, the form IO provides the adaptability to change the forms. There wasn't really a huge benefit to using it over form IO, which form IO is the actual source application. So whether we use the nice wrapper or just the root application, it's not much of a difference. All integrations need to be built from scratch anyway, and it's not a full solution. It's very early in the development stages. It's sort of like the learning to crawl before getting to that solution. The opportunities is the solutions likely to be expanded by the community. Threats, though, is sort of the same thing. It's very early release. It's very likely to drastically change over the next few months and several months here, which is something that's a fairly significant risk for us. So with those three there, we have decided to go with option B, which is Forms Flow AI. The opportunities of the solution and the possibilities of rapid development. Sorry, that's the wrong one. This one here, with the possibilities of rapid development and solving complex business requirements with ease, allows our team to focus on the more complicated issues on the technical side. As we're all aware, we have to integrate with CRA. We have to integrate with Equifax. We have to integrate with the SDC and the feds, disbursement systems, and all this other things, institutions, Ministry of Finance. There's a lot of work still to be done, so making our lives easier on some of these notes could be really, really beneficial for us. The 2 points that I made there, the learning curve could be significant and lengthy. We actually have a great opportunity. We have a AOT Forms Flow architect and developer joining our team to teach us the solution over there for free over the next little bit, just to help us out. So
because of that open source community, we will be contributing to them. They'll contribute to us as part of.
Yeah, so they have basically volunteered one of their devs to help us out for a bit, just teach us how to get up to speed quick, and then and then the next point there, the longevity and sustainability one, which is a big thing. Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health, and several other ministries actually are migrating to this platform, like right now. Ministry of Health is the first adopter of it. Finance is coming along, and there's a whole bunch of other ones moving as well to it. So the lab community is doing what they do best, and as a basically entirety of BC government as a whole, how do we make this better and more reliable for us as a whole? So there's a whole team and a whole community built upon making sure that this is going to be the right choice, and how do we sustain it long term. So with that, before I move into a quick little demonstration, is there anything I possibly missed? Just going through some notes. Anything you want to add there, Elise?
Maybe I'll just do a quick revision then. So essentially, you guys looked at 3 different products. You did a SWOT analysis on each one, and based on your analysis, you've decided that option 2, which is the Forms AO, is the way that you're going to go. And the risks that were identified, you're going to be able to mitigate those. And the exciting news is we'll actually have someone joining the team for a period of time to help us get to know that product. And ultimately, that will allow us to move forward more quickly, but more importantly, in a better way so that we can build this solution.
Yeah, and I should also note with that, we do have basically a fallback strategy of Forms Flow AI. This solution here, as I mentioned, it is basically the integration platform, you could say, of different systems. We are already using Commando. That's basically going to be the rules engine for us. Form.io is the dynamic form piece. We can always just pull our forms and workflows back to those main two products and work with just those two products and cut out everything else. We don't have to, like, if the analytics part, or if it seems like it's too big of a solution, like, we can always go right back to the raw basics very easily. We're not attaching ourselves at all. And again, that's the beauty of open source and everything being adaptive.
That's great.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to give us a quick demo of how it's easy to change questions? Program year should be much more painless, we're hoping.
Yeah, let's look at, oops, I need to go to student. Right. I just need to grab user here. I didn't have the user up. Oh, there we go. Testing, here we go. So this was one of our outcomes of our hackathon that we were just trying to see how it goes. Everybody's seen this part here. This is the application which you've seen previously. What we did though is we have oh crap. So I have the link. Andrew, do you recall the URL off by hand? Lost my page.
It's
the dynamic application form. Right. So here you will see basically the same application with some little tool tips and things like that.
Andrew, can you zoom in a little bit for some of us old folks? It's hard to see.
How's
Thank
that?
You. Better.
So this obviously is just something we created as a bit of a sandbox during this, like making sure it's going to fit some, making sure it's going to fit, and if we can integrate it and that kind of thing. Sort of continuing the analogy of putting the plumbing in the walls and that kind of thing. I just want to make sure that it's very clear that the plumbing isn't really in the walls and done yet. This is like taking the garden hose from outside and putting it in the kitchen sink. We just we aren't, it's, yes, that's, I just want to make sure that that's clear, that this is not like final and done. We still have a lot of standing up to do some of the infrastructure. But as you see, there is date pickers. There is, like this has the previous and next piece built right in. You'll see there is dependent questions you can have, like changing questions and that kind of thing. So it handles most of our like form requirements off my head. You'll see this too. This is picking from a hard-coded data list, basically. It's not connecting to actually like UVix programs or anything like that. This is just hard-coded data, but we have pick lists. And looking at what does this actually mean here? This solution here is, oops. Sorry, I had my pages open for too long.
That's good security that they time out.
Nope. I hope they're not doing the development patching right now. So we have the form here. This form is, this is Form.io. It says Formsflow AI here, but this is basically just, again, a wrapper for Form.io. You'll see that there's questions, there's little tool tips and things, but I can go in and edit the form components and say, let's just say we're now a USA residency question, and let's just get rid of the tooltip. And we're going to save the form here. And if we come back to our application here and look at it, it should say USA residency, and we don't have a tooltip. So I can add in cascading questions, some extra things. There is a lot of sort of, again, exceptions for this. Like if you're adding a new question, you still have to deal with the variables and the data and what actually happens. So there is back-end plumbing to this. But especially like changing wording on questions and that kind of stuff, we don't need to rebuild the front end or anything like that. It's just a form. What this does is, as you saw, I had to log in with my IDER while accessing this application. Because out of the box, FormsFlow AI is already integrated with Keycloak, which is our identity broker of how we handle students' BC ID, the institution's BC ID, the students' BC services card. It didn't take much to get that running with Keycloak because the solution's already set up to do that. What this also does is with this system, it integrates with Commando. And this is, I'm going to try not to speak too technical here, but basically there are workflows. Commando is a rules engine. It can have certain workflows in it. You can make workflows do math. You can make it do almost anything. Calling our API, which again, in technical words, that basically means calling our system that we can actually already make do whatever we want. So worst comes to worst, if we can't do it in this system, we can make it call basically our current stack and do whatever we want with it. Call CRA or something, ESDC, those types of things. And what Commando is, just to give a quick little rundown, this is a Commando workflow. All this does right now is it receives a number, checks and see if the number is odd or even, and if it's even, it does some math. If it's odd, it does some different math, and that's it. This was, again, just part of a test, but this is actually what the system is doing. This is not an interpretation of what the system's doing. It actually follows the boxes. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at, this is the running Commando engine right now, you will see that there are 31 instances here at this step. This means we've submitted basically the form 31 times, and it's at the box of defining if it's even or odd right now. And these are the instances running that data, and you can see that, oops, of course, timed out on me. Oh, that's going the wrong door. Let me just log back here. Some hold music for you.
So in other words, we don't have to have a massive team of a business analyst drawing logical workflows in Visio and then having them transcribed into cells in a detailed backend business rules.
More or less.
Nice.
It's all in the one container. So when we're looking at a workflow, like the translation from like a technical person like myself working with like a business person, Michelle, we can both look at the same picture. And if we need to change a box, we can do it together on basically common grounds, which makes things a lot easier. There's one less layer of interpretation here.
Like it's good to mention that is not a Commando workflow diagram. It's like the notation.
Yes.
Is like open is BPMN. That's like a well-known notation used all around everywhere.
Yes.
So it's really common to people know about it if they are doing workflows in other parts of the world. Anyway.
Yeah. So most modern rules engines use this notation, as Andrew was saying, BPMN and BMN. They're two open source standards of how to use this notation and that type of thing. So like I can come here and add in a box of send to finance. You still have to do all the back end work to do these boxes, obviously, but it's just hitting that common ground. And as Andrew said, it's all open standards. Nothing is proprietary on the modeling aspect for Commando at all. So nothing's like owned by them and like locking us in. There's some other backend stuff that's obviously different, but this notation is very, very well known. And so that's where we got. And as you see here, like we are sending just a whole bunch of variables to this thing. So CRA, again, obviously this was just more or less just tests and stuff. So a lot of it's not actually working, but sending variables and sending different things to this, and it's going to go through the boxes. And that's pretty much it.
Nice. Thank you, Schwenker.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, it's so, there's a lot of technical pieces in there, but I think what it shows for folks is that this is a really important decision, which will allow the tech team a much easier and more robust process in order for them to do their work, and particularly help us with all of our application and other questions. And we have lots of applications.
Hey,
So, yep.
Maybe it's important to mention that that workflow that Andrew showed together with the form that he was doing the change, that makes really easy and quickly to deploy new changes to the production. So if the business has something to change, the flow, sometimes you don't need even a developer. Somebody like a TBTB guy can go there, change that draw, change the drawing, is gonna deploy a new version, and the system is gonna respond to that change automatically in the same way as the form.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece, because when you look at our principles, one of the principles is about sustainability. We want to make sure that we're building a system that is sustainable, and so that our program year activities can be manageable in the future, in the long run. So that's a really good example of where it's manageable, and we may get to a place where there may be some activities that the business might even be responsible for doing. Just throwing it out there. We're not there yet. Don't worry about it. But this is a really sustainable way. So it's super exciting and a very big decision that you can see not only will help us build the system, but operate the system on a long-term basis as well.
Yep, awesome. And so I see a lot of really great questions have come out of that. I still think we should press on with some of the UI work, because likely some of this will answer some of the questions I've seen.
I think so.
Yeah, so Roops made a little joke in section 4. We know that you can't see these wireframes. There's a lot here. So it's here for reference, but Roops going to walk us.
Michelle.
I'm not sharing my screen. Of course I'm not. There we go. Okay, we can't see this. This is what's called the brand new onboarding of a designation wireframes and all the pages they have to go through. So the UI team has done a lot of work to get the initial drafts out the door, and Roop is going to walk us through. He's got a link to Figma here. That's the design tool if you want to follow along, but I'm going to have Roop share your screen.
And unmute. Hello, everybody. So previously on product review, I shared with you the institution onboard / designation workflow that we had put together. I won't go into detail because I've done it previously, so feel free to go back to wherever we put those recordings to check that out. But what I want to do is kind of share the outcome of this in wireframe form. So as we mentioned, there's a BCEID login process that institutions will undergo. And the assumption right now with this flow right now, just so everyone is aware, is the person doing this task has the ability to also administer the location, or the institution, I mean, as well. So to begin, they would either log in or sign up with BCEID, whole other process that I won't get into right now. But once you're in, you begin by creating your own profile, so the information for you as the user who's creating this, and then you start filling in all of the institution information that you would normally do. Now, if this might look familiar because it is using the current designation form as the kind of guide for all this info. Again, in the interest of moving forward swiftly and with purpose, we are using the current form. We're not worrying about the words right now, or we're not worrying about, is this exactly the questions we want to ask at this point in time? We're just making sure that the workflow makes sense and letting dev get started. So as you can see here is, let's say you've completed all your profile information for yourself and for the institution. Next is the designation process. We'd explain a little bit about what this is for, things that you're going to need to get this going. And then also you might need, if you had multiple locations that you added, you would be letting us know which ones you would like to be designated. At this point in time, this is just for the future. At the beginning, you're only going to be adding a primary location. So this is kind of is just thinking about the future and just having a place for that. Next up is the addition of an approved education program. Again, the business area is working on, what are the exact questions and information that we're going to need for this piece. But we're just going by what was on the current designation form. So you go in and enter all of your program info, your delivery information, requirements, ESL content. I can continue reading the screens, but I'll let you just check them out as we scroll down.
And by the way, I'm sure you know there's good work going on behalf of the business as part of their projects to confirm the information that we will be gathering.
Exactly.
On this page. Yeah.
Yep. And so just to give you a brief look into how this kind of works, and this is based again off the current form. If you were to go in and answer these questions, there's a lot of different, this is the exact same screen, but if you were to select certain things, what would you see instead? A couple of warnings to let them know if the program won't be eligible because of a selection they've made. Program delivery options, again, just letting them know about some information about them. Write down the entire form here. If you want to go through and look at this a little bit closer, I do encourage you to check out that Figma link in Mural to dig a bit deeper. Finally, it's the declaration form. We had some discussions about the way that this process works, and we came up with some cool solutions that I think we'll share with you in the future around, why do we need to let them do this entire form and then come back and sign a different document? Why not just preempt it and sign ahead of time? Things like that. I think there is some room for improvement in that process as well. And then finally, once you submit all of this and you acknowledge that you're signing everything away and all that kind of good stuff, and you want to be a part of the designation process, you are then going to continue to the next steps. And so again, in an effort to make sure this is as streamlined as possible, it's going in and, your designation process is in progress with the ministry and StudentAid BC. So what can you do in the meantime? Obviously, you can't go in and, confirm enrollment and things like that. So what we're going to do is give them the option to add users to the institution. So if their business BCEID profile contains users, we're going to allow them to take a look at those users and assign some permissions at this point before even designation is completed. It's just a matter of saying, yes, I want this person to have access. So it doesn't really hinge on anything designation related at this point. Although if they don't receive their designation, this is all a waste of time, but 97% of the time, it's not a waste of time. So adding users to the account, let's go ahead and do that. So here you'll see a list of all of the users who will be in their business BCID. And then we, again, are just kind of letting them know if you're missing people, if there's people who you would like to see on this list that are not. You can learn more about adding users to your business BCEID through the business BCEID profile manager. And then on this screen, you're just going to see the name of the users, their email, and you can select the roles for them. At this point, we're just working through what those roles are at this point in time, but essentially you're going to have an admin role of sorts and an editor role of sorts where you're just going to do things like confirming enrollment and things like that. So yeah, we'll have a deeper discussion, I think, maybe next week about what those roles are, because I'm sure there's a lot of you that have some questions around that. But for now, this is just how you select them. And then finally on the confirmation screen, we just give you a heads up to say you've given these people these roles and you haven't given access to these other users. And then once you're completed that step, that's all for now. We kind of send them on their way to say we'll let you know when we're all completed. But yeah, the hope is that as a new institution, there's going to be obviously a different kind of workflow for existing institutions. That this is going to be more hands-off for us, and it lets us get back to what we need to do, not re-entering data into other forms and other systems. So once they enter this information, it's more a matter of confirmation rather than data entry for us as StudentAid BC. Any questions? Never mind. Wait till the end. Thank you.
Wait till the end. Thanks, Roop. Thanks very much, Roop. I know that we're not perfect, and that is just the initial draft. So thank you very much for sharing that. It looks great. We have 2 new team members who have joined us as part of this last sprint, Courtney and Lynn, and they have been helping Roop do some other support documentation as part of the UI UX analysis. And Courtney, if you're on the line, has done some good work organizing and adding relationships to some of the personas. And so she's going to walk us through that right now as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney. For those of you that are involved in some form of the process for the project, you've probably seen me in some meetings over the last couple weeks, but if not, I work as a UX content strategist for ACE. So how you've heard Elise and Roop and Schwenker talk about how the words will be sorted, that's going to be part of my process and helping make sure that we get the right wording to achieve all of the policy and business goals that we need to hit. So one of the things that I started with as I've kind of adjusted into and become embed into the Agile team is really focusing on tightening up our personas. So if you've been to these before, you've probably seen Matt, you've probably seen some of the personas, and we've been using them to explain our demos and test some of our theories. But they were all kind of sequestered in little individual groups, and it was hard to see the relationship. And as we know, probably from real life, is that family is pretty complicated sometimes. And our personas get a little complicated as we start to build relationships. So I'm just going to show, there's what Roop said, there's an image for ants on the Figma, on the Miro board, but I've created just a rough map of how all of our personas will exist as I'm starting to work through them. So you'll see why the need for the map has become clear, because we initially launched our students, and then we added some post-secondary institution officials, and then we also added some parents and spouses. And we also, while we were using these, started to use them in coordination, because some are actually dependent on one another. And I'll go through some of that with you in just a few seconds, but I just wanted to let you know how these are used. So we have the students as a representative sample of our overall students. So this isn't going to cover every single element that could possibly be covered in the application. There will be some fringe scenarios that won't necessarily have a persona attached to them. But what these personas are meant to do is represent our groups as a whole, to make sure that we identify how we can best serve each group with their own differing needs. And so I'm just going to zoom in to Matt here. Matt is probably the one that you've all had the most experience with, because he is kind of our first path that we're going through. And so Matt is being used to test whether some of these onboarding processes and application processes work for someone who would be like Matt. Why we need this persona map is because, as we can see, he has a permanent disability status, which means he is going to be interacting with an accessibility officer. So we are needing to see some of these relationships to make sure that we're not making things overly complicated, because the function of these personas is not to catch everything, it's not to trick us, it's not to make things more difficult. We're going to use these specific personas as tools for testing. So some other personas you've seen are David and Zoe. And so being able to see that they're linked and they're coworkers makes us, whenever we're using these personas to test demos or look at potential wireframes or theories that we're working on, we know that the interconnection between them has to be maintained. And that when we consider David, we also need to really think about how this could potentially work with Zoe as well, because they're going to be representing a very common structure that we're going to see in personas. So This is, as a whole, something that has just been started, and I'm just working on how all of the connections come. The feedback from the MSAC, so a group of post-secondary institution officials, provided some feedback that helped us build the post-secondary personas. Data helped us build the students, and we're just working on figuring out the additional parents and spouses that we'll need. So this will start to become more solidified as we move, but now that we can see it all as a whole, it really allows us to make sure that we are capturing everything we need to capture and keeping things organized. So figuring out the personas isn't the hard part of the demo. Watching what the demo is doing and how those personas are used will be the part that we can focus on. So if anyone has any questions or curious about how personas work in the demo, happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. Okay, before we get to questions, we're just going to briefly talk about what's coming up next for our team. Elise, do you want to do it? Well, I can, whichever you like.
Sure. Yep. So next sprint. So now we've made a very important technical decision that will really help. Our plan for the next sprint is to develop and implement that decision. So we're going to, we got to get those things built. So that's going to allow us to go back and redo a little bit more, not a little bit, a lot more permanently how we're collecting the information. So we already showed you part of Matt's journey and him submitting information. But what we didn't show you was that that information wasn't really going anywhere. So now we're going to show you where that information is actually going to be able to be kept, that we can come up with more complex questions. And we're going to do the same thing with the institution information that we're collecting. We're going to go back, we're going to make sure that we're able to collect that information and also keep it in a safe place. So the technical team will be doing the behind the scenes stuff. They'll also be doing some of those questions out front. And the UX and UI team is going to continue working on that user access role. We're going to continue basically where we've left off around the dashboard and working on the institution side of things. And we're going to start picking up more of that conversation about program, so that we understand what those significant changes are that the business wants to make and start to think about how do we make that a reality. So that's what the next sprint is going to be. It's going to be pretty exciting, and this sprint was really critical to allow us to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to continue on there, the UX team is going to continue on with some of the work that they've been doing. They've there's some business decisions that impact the first draft of these wireframes. So we're waiting on those meetings to happen. And then we can button those up in time for sprint 7, maybe. We're not sure yet. And then also doing a deeper dive into that education's program profile specifically is kind of our hot topic. We want to solve for that soon, which is exciting. Okay, lots of great questions have come in. So sure. Let's just get at them.
Okay, so I do just want to acknowledge one piece that we didn't show today, and just in case folks were wondering, we had hoped that we were going to be able to show folks a sample of an institution journey around what it's like to get a business BCEID. So we haven't forgotten that we committed to that. We just haven't been able to get all of the work that we need done with the BCEID folks. So we weren't able to get that done in time for you today. So we will have to move that back, but that will be on our bring forward list. So we haven't forgotten about it. So all of these questions, so there's a bunch of questions in the chat area, and I think as much as you've kind of moved those over to that area. So there's also a whole bunch of comments. So thank you to folks. We are absolutely reading them, but probably won't read all of them out loud. So the first question is around would the account be deactivated? So this is related to the first part of the demo when we talked about institution user signs it, new institution user signs in and they create an account if there hasn't already been one. And then they start moving through the designation process. And what happens if we get to the end of that process and they're not eligible? And so these are some business decisions that can be made, but I would imagine that we still need to capture the information that they applied and what the rationale was for the decision. So will they move to designated status? Absolutely not, unless that decision is made, but they might move to, well, the business can tell us whether they want a denied status or not designated and a reason. But we, from a records management, we need to keep that information to show that, yeah, you did reach out to us and here was our decision. There's a question about what happens when one school buys out another. Are they allowed to keep the unique identifier? That would be a business question that we would ask the business. How do you want to be able to manage that? I don't know how we do that now. I think Neve or Phil Frias, could you answer that now? How do we do that now? Is there a new school code that's created?
They keep the institution code.
Okay. So good question. Again, we'll follow whatever records management rules and whatever the business wants for us to do. And we'll just make sure that we build the system as flexible as possible to either stop that account and then start a new one, or if we need to make some adjustments to that existing account, making sure that we have audit history so that we can tell what those changes were. Phil Frias, sorry, I don't need to call out who's asking the question. That's just a bad habit. Would the account be deactivated after a period of time? So I can tell you that we have flagged the need or a feature for archiving accounts, and the same goes for students' accounts, but we don't plan on managing in the MVP. Right now, we're going to focus on building it up, but by the end of this project in a couple of years and after a couple of releases, we do need to have the ability to archive so that we can be compliant with records management policies. But that will not be part of the MVP. And please let me know if I'm not answering the question or if you don't like my answer. I feel pretty confident that you will, but is the person making the designation application automatically made the institution administrator? So this is, don't know the answer to that right now. We need to do some work on users, but I believe what's underneath this is, do we want to give the first person that comes in to an institution account the ability to make all the decisions about the users and who gets added and all of that? That is absolutely an administration user functionality. So we need to figure out how to do that and what that looks like. So I don't know the answer to that just yet, and we need to work that through. And as we work that through, we'll bring it to you and make sure that it works for the business. I think that David has probably answered the question about FAOs having a personal BCE ID. No, just a reminder that institution users sign in using a business BCE ID. They are each given one, and it links them to the organization that they work for. So they're not signing in as an individual. They're signing in through a business BCE ID. Then I think there was a couple questions about audit history there. So this is around the questions, right? So Andrew is demonstrating let's change the question from Canadian residency or BC residency to US. How do we keep a history of that old information? So I don't know, Andrew, if you can speak to that. I can definitely say we know we need to. We absolutely need to keep a record of what was the question, when did it change, that kind of a thing. But I don't know if you can speak to that now, Andrew.
Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
Both Commando and Formato do have a versioning process in them. We haven't explored them yet, so can't talk too much about it, but Yeah, there is a
Okay.
versioning process.
It's for
Okay.
IO, Michelle.
Thank you.
So yeah, we do need to be able to track that and keep that information. So we will do that. There's a comment about privacy compliance, and so anything that we do in the new system must be privacy compliant. So if we're throwing something out there that seems as though it's non-compliant, appreciate when you let us know, because we'll work through, and obviously we will make changes so that we are compliant. Definitely we can do that. If you mess up a form, can you revert back? And I think this is about if you mess up the question, instead of rewriting it, can we kind of undo? I think, Andrew, does that functionality exist, or do you just retype it in?
Well, if you're just in the middle of the changing form, if you just hit cancel, you undo your changes. It's basically just a not saving the Word document type process. But if you're like trying to revert to previous versions, again, that's along the lines of the versioning thing. We haven't explored it too much about how easy it is to revert it, but again, these applications are very well used. So normally, like reverting to other versions, especially we started looking into it for is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then I think when you were demoing the piece around the business process flows, I think there's some different comments and folks that are interested in the idea of, isn't it cool that we're going to be able to have a flow and our system follows that flow? And so we're going to be able to see it. So it'll make operations and maintaining this so much easier. So super exciting about that in the future. So yes, it looks like business process flow is BPMN is like the language of technical business process flows. So it's not Visio language. I think a number of us have had some training in that. It's a very standardized way of creating business flows, and that's how information will be added into this new system. So that'll make it really understandable and consistent and standardized as well, which is really great. So then there's some conversation about supporting the product over time. And just a reminder that for this project, the long-term vision has always been that we move to a place where we build something that is sustainable, and not only sustainable, but sustainable within our own internal resources, so that we're not as reliant on purchasing contractors and externalizing that knowledge. So part of this is absolutely moving towards a goal where our internal support IT folks can support this system.
Hey, this is Harry. That's not exactly what I meant.
Okay.
One of my examples was Linux is completely free, but the government mandate is to have a supported product. So that's why it's bought through Red Hat. And I'm sure that the development op teams can't actually change the product itself, right? They can support what you want to do with the product, but they can't change the product. That's done by a community. So I'm just wondering, this is a little different from what I've heard before, which was the mandate to have a supported product. Now, I know supported by community, but it's not an on-demand support. So I'm just wondering, has that been relaxed for this sort of a thing or not?
And Andrew or Sid, could you speak to that? Because I'm sorry, I can't speak to that.
So the products do have a supported platform behind it, even if they're free, like Commando, for the version we're running. They do have multiple versions of their application. This one is supported by their team and free. It's sort of like, it's actually kind of relative to the form solution kind of thing, and how like it's fully supported, but they always hope that you buy the fancy extra things that Commando is used by what are some of the organizations? I'm pretty sure like NASA and some of those other ones in the States actually use it, and it's fully international. But I totally do understand what you're saying, Harry, and maybe we can answer that a little better.
Okay, so what you say is what you're saying is that it is okay with OCIO, for example, to have this product which is not a paid supported product. Meaning, you know, with a paid supported product, you can contact the support group directly and say, hey, I've got a problem, you need to fix this. But with this, you can, or, you know, do you have, 100%, oh yeah, we'll get on that? Like, I'm just wondering if the BC government has, or the OCIO has said, we don't have to have this kind of a product anymore. It's okay to use a free one.
And a lot's being provided through the Platform Services Group for this too. Most of the things we're talking about today are what are available through the Platform Services Group in OpenShift. So there's an element of support there as well. But it's also not a free-for-all. We still have to go through any tools we bring in that aren't in that Platform Services menu. We do have to run through your typical STRA and whatnot, but that's generally because we're using stuff that is known, not going to be an issue. We would just go through standard protocol for that. Sorry, Andrew.
Okay, so the product is supported then through OpenShift. You pay OpenShift?
Which is Red Hat.
OpenShift is a paid platform, yeah.
Okay, OpenShift is supporting this product as part of that paid contract then.
Yeah, we look to the Platform Services Group at this point. So.
Okay, that explains it then. It is paid for. Thanks.
Yeah, and it just is maybe it's fair to mention that not just because of that, but the other ministers are already using the projects. We are not the first ones, right?
Yeah, that's relating to what Jamie was saying with the Platform Services team.
Okay.
Basically bringing on that support for government.
Awesome.
Okay.
Back to you, Elise.
Thank you. Thanks. So then there's a suggestion that we flip the program information after the regulatory. Great. Yep. We can totally do that. And you saw with this system that it'll be a lot easier. We'll just literally drag and drop and it'll move it into a different place. So that's great. Thank you for that feedback. Right, so we've got the different users and different conversation. We know we need to have more conversation about institution users, how they're set up, how they're maintained in the new system. So that'll be a discussion forward. And then a concern about granting approval before you learn all the information. So absolutely, we need to make sure that we don't grant any kind of approvals without all of the necessary information. And we also need to come up with our workflows and of course run them by our privacy folks to make sure that they are compliant, because as I mentioned before, we will be compliant. That's one of the goals here. I think folks are starting to get to the point where they need to head out. So, concern about reusing IDs, okay. Does the AOT form solution come with a pre-built generic data model or best practices?
I did answer that already in the chat there.
Oh, you did. Okay.
It has some data practices of how you basically use the system, but it doesn't have a predefined model.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry. So yeah, I feel like we've covered off most of the questions in the chat there. Was there any that I missed that I maybe scrolled by too quickly, or anything that brought up other questions for folks? I think it's fair to say that this decision is exciting, but obviously we need to do some more work. We will be privacy compliant. I think I've said that once or twice. And as we use this product, I'm not quite sure what to call it, this technology, that we'll run into a few bumps and we'll continue to get some feedback. So we're looking forward to coming back and showing you the next iteration of the application. Having used this technology, we can move some things around. We can do it really quickly too, which is exciting. So
awesome. Thanks, Elise. Any final questions burning before we let you all go? Okay, great. Thanks very much. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Easter.
Thank you.